In this video, we're gonna go over how to disassemble and reassemble an Xbox One, so that way you can clean it out, repair it, and or upgrade it. So that way you can follow me through exactly how I do it. So let's jump right in. All right, so now we're given the Xbox. We're at the front here. You're gonna turn it onto the side with the USB. What we're gonna be using are used gift cards and or credit cards. Eventually we're gonna use tweezers. And a couple of things that we're gonna need are T10 security screws and also T8 security screws. So first things first, we're gonna get the side panel off, which you could go ahead and use a credit card for. So we're gonna kind of wedge it up underneath here, kind of pry it up. Get around here. And after you loosen up enough, the rest will come right out. It's just held on with these little tabs here. Set that off to the side. Next thing is right up here. We're gonna slide this plastic piece is on a rail. We're gonna slide this straight out, and there it is. And as you see, there's a little rail system here, and as well as right here. All right, next, we're going to apply pressure down on this corner, but then up on this corner. And then we're also going to try to pull this apart at the same time. So down, up, and kind of pull it apart. And you will hear it snap. At this point in time, you could toss in a credit card just to make sure that this does not snap back together. And it holds your position. Now we can come around to the back with another credit card and start kind of wedging it at the corners, and also apply pressure, spreading it over where the other credit card is. So come back here above the grills, and again, applying pressure. And as you see, I'm pulling this apart here as I'm also putting this in here. So let me readjust. I'll toss the card in there to hold my position. Come back over here and grab this card. All right, so now we got that. Come over to this side. Just finish the rest of the process of snapping it open. Okay, so now when you're at that point, you could turn it so it's sitting down on the bottom. And now we're gonna lift up to loosen the bottom, but now we're not gonna lift all the way up because there is a ribbon cable on the front side of this thing. And we do not want that to rip. Let's see if I could get to show you this. You see right here, there's a ribbon cable right in the center, right here. Now there's a blue plastic piece that's attached to the ribbon that comes around this whole connector, and there's also a beige area here. The beige section is what we're gonna try to release as we hold up this blue. So you could use tweezers here to assist you. Lift up the blue here, and then just use our fingers to try to release the beige, which it does, and the ribbon cable comes straight out. All right. So at that point, the lid is fully released from the rest of the system. Let's get the rest of the faceplate off. Easiest thing is to start with the power button. In this corner, you're gonna see all these tabs here. There's a few all the way across. Same concept as before, we're gonna apply a little bit of pressure in the top here and use our other thumb to lift up these tabs. And we're just gonna slightly apply pressure as we lift them all up. And now the top comes right off. And again, that's what those tabs look like right there and on this side. So we're just lifting those up to release them. So now we can fully clean this and get that cleaned out. And here you have access to the entire top. This grill part does not come out. It is welded on there with plastic, and that's that. Next thing, let's go ahead and get the speaker off. There are little tabs here holding it in. It's pressurized, so you could just squeeze this corner, lift up the back here, and then you're gonna lift this towards the back because it has little hooks on it that hold it in place. So now with this, we're gonna wiggle these cables out. Now the speaker is free and can be replaced as needed. Next thing is to go ahead and get the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth board off. There is a Wi-Fi antenna coming all the way across here. You could use tweezers real quick, pop that up. So for these back ones, we're gonna need our T8. There are two right here, holding the board. And apply pressure up on the board evenly from each corner. Or you could even get up under here in this corner. Tweezers, again, can still help. And applying pressure evenly across the whole thing allows me to disconnect it from the connector underneath. And that way, you have it fully disassembled. And this can be replaced as needed. Do not try to rip off this cable just yet. It is attached underneath. We'll get to that shortly. Back around towards the front of the system, we have the same connector that was on the other end. We could go ahead and lift that up. Now that's popped off. So now let's go ahead and get the bottom of the case off the system. So to do that, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 T10 screws on this one. Now at this point, the top lid here is open, but don't pull that off just yet. Again, let's go ahead and get this plastic off. So it's easier to come to the side here and just grab that. Kind of lift up, get your fingers underneath of it. And there, I have it fully lifted away from the bottom case. So now we can come up to the front here. As you saw, there is a connector here. There is no motherboard here. This is actually a wire connected to the motherboard. So what we're gonna wanna do is lift straight up, slightly, and start to lean it up towards that back corner to reveal that wire. So now this wire is attached to this plastic piece. We can go ahead and wiggle this out from the motherboard, and now the lid is fully off. You can also take out these 3 screws here to remove this cable and replace it if needed, but that's not fully necessary as it is only a patch cable and not an actual full connector with a motherboard or anything. Now, if you need to replace this cable, there are 2 points of connection on here. We can go ahead and get our tweezers, get underneath these little tabs, and we're just gonna straighten them out. So that way we can pull this cable out and replace it if needed. Okay, so now what we have here is the hard drive, we have the CD drive, and we have the fan, and the CPU cooler. So let's continue. To get the CD drive out, we're gonna take the SATA cable, kind of wiggle it back and forth, front and back, while pulling up, and that will release. Same for the power. We're gonna wiggle this left and right, and pulling up, and that comes out. And now the whole cage itself comes right out, and I have access to the CD drive. Now, to get this bracket off the back here, there are little tabs here. We're gonna apply pressure out and drop it straight down while keeping in mind that there is a tab right here going through the metal that keeps it in place. So apply out to the side and bring it straight down. And that way, that's fully released. Now we can go ahead and take out this SATA cable from the back of the CD drive. Again, wiggling it. And same for the power. And that's the CD drive. We can go ahead and get the cable plugged back in. Again, there are guides on these plastic pieces to make it sure it fits back in position. And same for the SATA cable. It can go ahead and make sure there's a L-shaped piece in here. Make sure that that L piece is on position to place it back in. All right, and that's the CD drive. Now let's go ahead and take off the front I/O. To that, we need our T8. There are just 3 screws here on the front. And on this side right here, underneath all these pins, it does connect directly to the motherboard. So what we're gonna do is grab in this section and pull straight up, and then now it's disconnected. For the hard drive, we could go ahead and disconnect this power on this motherboard and the SATA, and go ahead and grab the cage and lift straight up. On the bottom side here, we have a couple of screws. We have T10 screws over here. There are 4 of them. And again, I'm getting these outer ones, not the inner ones, as those are just regular hex heads. All right, get the rest of those screws out. And with that, now the hard drive is removed. And you can't remove this cable first before you take out the hard drive, as these tabs right here lock into these holes on this piece. So now once that's removed, you can go ahead and wiggle this cable back and forth while pulling out. Oh. And now you have a full cable removed to either be replaced, and now you could actually upgrade your hard disk drive to a solid state drive. So let's put everything back together. Go ahead and line up the slits, small on the left and bigger on the right. Just push that right back in. Make sure that these tabs fit into these holes. And we're gonna have to pinch it to hold it in position. Grab our screws back. Once you get one Again, you don't need to go too tight. And then we'll just get the rest of these in. So now the next step is to take out the motherboard. To do that, there's a white tab over here. You're going to need a T8 to take out this screw here. And by doing so, that forces that out. And this is actually held in position by two tabs here that go into the motherboard. In the front here, we have the same concept with these plastic pieces as well, but these are actually pinched into location. So what you want to do is from the inside, you could pinch together and then it releases it. So now what we could do is flip it over. We have 4, 2 over here and 2 over here, T10s. All right, now we'll go ahead and grab our T8. There are 4 screws here. And these 4 screws go directly into the heat sink. Okay, so now we're ready to take out the motherboard. Keep in mind, right underneath the power connector, there is a black tab sticking through in between these 2 prongs, right where my fingertip's at. And you're gonna have to kind of pull that up and then you can release the motherboard. So just keep that in mind when you're dealing with this. So now we're at the front of the console. Here's the USB port that's on the front left. You're going to want to grab the heatsink, pull up towards you, so up on this side, and you may need to pull up on this too, the little USB hub over here. Now again, like I mentioned, that black tab that's underneath here, that's connected to the motherboard. So as well, grab this corner, pull that up, and then with that, you can fully release it. So now we need to take off the fan. If you need to replace the fan because it's damaged or broken, or clean it off because it's super dusty, you can go ahead and do that now. Now these tabs are brittle. This one did break off already. So I will be focusing on this one. But typically you're gonna have 2 on each side here, and you're gonna have to try to get underneath of them to pry them up to get them out of the groove that is cut into the metal here. So what I'm going to do is get underneath here, kind of prying up on it, but then also pulling it away from the heatsink. I'm just gonna reset here. I'm just gonna keep on doing that same technique. So pull away from the motherboard, as well as lifting up on this tab slightly. And then you get it released. But keep in mind when doing that, you're gonna have to do that for both sides at the same time. Just take your time and kind of wiggle this one up a little bit, and then come back over here and wiggle this one up a little bit until you get that fully off. So now with that side lifted up, you go ahead and pull away from the heatsink, and now you have this cable here, which you go ahead and pull on it up and wiggle it, and now you have access to the fan to be replaced and or cleaned fully. To gain access to the thermal paste to replace that, we're gonna have to take off the heatsink. On the back side, we have a X spring tensioner. Go ahead and toss in some tweezers here and kind of prying up on it. And again, what I'm doing here is, as you see here, there's kind of like a piece folded over, and it's latching it back into the piece. So what we're gonna do is right in between where that is, we're gonna shove the needle into it and kind of wiggle it around while lifting up on this to lift up the piece. And after enough force is applied, you should be able to release it. And now the third one, apply a little bit and lift up. And then the fourth one, you don't have to pry out, as you could just simply pull it off to the side and then it fully releases. So now with that, you could go ahead and flip this back over, and you're going to lift the heatsink straight up. So now you have full access to the heat spreader and the CPU. So now all you need to do is go ahead and get a cloth. You could go ahead and start wiping off the thermal paste on both the CPU and the heatsink. This thermal paste has already been replaced and is still liquidy and comes off a little bit easy for me. If you need a little bit more of a cleaning solution to get that thermal paste off and it might be dried, you could go ahead and get some isopropyl alcohol. Go ahead and dab that on a cloth a little bit. And then you could go ahead and rub that around, and that will loosen up any hard thermal paste and also make sure that everything is fully cleaned. All right, so now we got all that cleaned up. Go ahead and get our thermal compound. Go ahead and get this thing opened up. This is definitely bigger than what you need. I'll show you the amount up close once I get this thing applied. All you're gonna wanna do is get a little bead-shaped amount on here. All right, so now let me show you what that looks like. So that is the amount I used. As you see, it's beaded up. It's raised up off of it a little bit. It's about the size of a green pea. And now we'll go ahead and put the heatsink back on. As you see the placement, this heatsink does have like a little ridge right here. That heatsink ridge goes over the MOSFETs on this side here. So just keep that in mind. If it's raised up here, that means it goes over here. So now we could go ahead and get the heatsink, line it back up. The heatsink is going to cover this front corner more than it is anywhere else. As you can see, we're going to get that lined up with the holes. It went right through the holes so that these are now visible on the back side. So we're going to flip this over. And it is okay, the heatsink is kind of coming off of the thermal paste a little bit and reseating itself as I'm moving it. That's perfectly fine. So now all we need to do is go ahead and get our X spring back in here. I'm gonna start by hooking it on any of these and then just start pushing them, getting them in line. And then I'm just gonna start pushing them straight down onto the heatsink. And then they will just click right into place. So now it's in place. And for the heatsink, we can go ahead and give it a little wiggle, and that way we know it's perfect. Now the next step to reassemble everything is go ahead and grab your fan again. The cable always comes out to the back here because it is plugging in right there. Go ahead and make sure that these tabs are in line. There are guides around here on the fan too that will seat it properly. And all you're gonna do is just kind of snap it back in place. And when doing that, you wanna have all these tabs kind of going down at the same time. So how far these are on this side, I'm gonna try to do the same on this side. But obviously it is easier to do it while it's flat. So with those on, now it's just click back in place. Just make sure all these tabs are on, so apply a little bit more force if needed to make sure that everything is snapped in place. Perfect. Don't forget, definitely get this cable plugged back into the motherboard. Because without that, your motherboard will overheat and you will not be playing games anytime soon. All right, now we got our bottom metal case. And in reverse of how we took this out, we're gonna put the rear IO into the case first, then we're gonna apply pressure to put the motherboard fully in. So easiest thing to do is line the motherboard up to this back left corner as it is not lined up to the right side of this case. So back left corner all the way. And we're gonna put the rear IO in first. And then the top, we're gonna wiggle this in. Keep in mind of these rubber, well not rubber, these foam paddings around everywhere. Now it's in place. Just make sure everything is fully seated. And again, if this back corner is giving you issues, just keep in mind that black one, right where my fingertips at, right in between these prongs, that piece needs to be seated. And again, you'll know that you have everything seated correctly if the rear IO and front IO match up to all their holes. So now with that done, to help assist us keeping the motherboard in, go ahead and grab these black tabs back. Again, we have two prongs on the bottom here. Those go into these holes on the motherboard. And they will just snap right back into the front here. And again, same concept. You could squeeze that a little bit and I'll bring those in. So that way you can put it right back in place. Now we have the white one, which again is going to take a screw, a T8. easiest thing I found to do is put the screw in the hole first, line up the prongs with the motherboard, and then you're gonna try to wiggle it together so that that screw meets into the hole. And then now, once it's lined up, apply pressure on this and here and screw it into place, and that way it will be easier. All right, so now let's go back to the hard drive. There are little holes in here on the motherboard to help align everything. So once you get those holes lined up, so for instance, this corner right here, there's a little prong coming off the bottom here, and it's gonna go into, let's see, that hole right here where my index is. The bigger hole off to the side here is for a screw, but that small one is where this little prong goes into. And same on this side here too. So once you get it seated, it should not move on the motherboard. It will just be seated pretty good. We'll go ahead and connect the data SATA cable back on there and the power. Next, we'll get the CD drive. In this case, I have the plastic still removed. Look for this black tab here, and it will meet with this hole here. So align it up and get it snapped back into place. With these tabs clipping all the way in, and again, that hole filled with that tab now. All right, so now that we're here, you can see there's groove lines on these foam pads. That's where it needs to go with the metal here. So I'm gonna line up those. And as well as these holes back here, they need to go in. Because again, same concept for the hard drive, there are little tabs back here that need to go into the motherboard. And again, those holes are gonna be here and here. All right, so same concept as the CD hard drive. You're gonna wiggle it, and if it doesn't move, then it's perfect. So let's go ahead and get this power cable connected back in, and the data cable. Cool, moving right along. Now, this is where we can connect the front I/O again. Again, you gotta have this connector down here. It's gonna connect right to that hole right there. Again, you're gonna line up that, just press directly on that, not the rest of the board. And then now it will be in line to re-put in these 3 screws. Well, you can take this apart and or put it back together in any order. But in this way, I'm just doing that. On the bottom here, if you want to, you can go ahead and hold on to these, flip the whole thing over. And now we'll go ahead and toss our T10 screws back in here. This is the main power connector over here, and then this is the USB port that's on the side here. as well as these 4 down here that again screw directly into the heatsink. All right. So now I do have the CD drive in here and the hard drive. So again, just keep that in mind as you flip it back over. You may want to put those in after you put in all the screws. So we'll just get this lined back up real quick. All right, so now that's done. Now we can go ahead and grab the top. We're gonna reattach the Wi-Fi cable. Let's go ahead and make sure that we got this lined up properly. Yeah, so we'll go in like that. So again, we're gonna get these little metal tabs, slide them into these holes. And now once it's through it, you can come back here and just simply fold these back down. And we'll do the same for this back one. So push through, back here, these little tabs. Just fold them back over. Perfect. Okay, now we can go ahead and reattach this back cable. Again, it's going right down here next to the white tab. Go ahead and put the side, well, the corner of the lid on the ground and reattach the cable. And now we can go ahead and lift this over and seat it into place, which this foam goes all the way around and kind of seals it together, but this is still loose. We could go ahead and grab the speaker. Again, these tabs are in here first. Go ahead and stick it through these holes first and then fold it down so that these tabs click into place. So we got those two in there first. Fold this down and now it clicks into place and is held. Okay, now we got this cable hook onto the front panel again. That's snapped back into place. Now we have our Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The connector here on this corner is going to stay on this corner so that way the board actually overhangs the metal. So we're just gonna line this up and apply 4 straight down. And now we're gonna go ahead and get our 2 screws, which are T8s. And we're gonna reattach this. And again, these are going into plastic, so all you need to do is tighten these enough so that way you feel a little bit of resistance, and that's it. Okay, so now this cable, it's gonna connect onto the closest connector like that. There are 2 over here, but again, it's going on the closest one. You're gonna wanna make sure that this is as flat as possible when you're applying it, and apply equal pressure. And it just clicks right into place. Same here in the front. There's a connector here. Go ahead and place the wire on there as flat as possible. and apply equal force, and it will just get on there and slightly click into place. And that is the lid. Just make sure it's seated down properly. Looks like the hard drive kind of popped up, but now that's seated back down. We'll grab the bottom chassis. We know that it's the bottom because it has holes cut out for the rear I/O. And this is the front. So we'll take the console, just set it in there, and pretty much it just sits right into place. There's nothing too crazy about that. Now we'll go ahead and grab the rest of our 7 screws. These are labeled with C's all around here, and that's the easiest way to see that. So here I got a C8, a C1, C5, C7, C6, C2, and C4. And these are T10s. So again, we'll go ahead and get these tightened down. Again, these are also plastic. So again, you do not want to tighten these down too hard. A tip too is to turn to the left first. So you hear it click into line for those threads. Go ahead and get all these done. Cool, got that done. Now the easiest thing to do is, instead of attaching the front panel on to this and then applying everything back together, it's easier to take the top panel alone and attach that to the rest of the case. So all you're gonna do is line it back up, so that way all these tabs can start reconnecting in again. So they're in line. That made slight clicks. Yeah, it made slight clicks, nothing too major. And then we're just gonna come around and pinch all the corners. Again, there's nothing too crazy going on here. It's already locked in place. So now we got our front panel I/O. Again, we have this ribbon cable. We know that this is the CD drive, so this definitely goes on the left here. So now this ribbon cable, we'll fold it down. And just like when taking it off, we're gonna have to do it in reverse. We have to put the cable in first. Again, if you cannot fit this in, make sure that this beige tab is pulled away from the white. And what you're gonna have to do is try to get the ribbon in first while lifting this blue tab up, shove in the cable, and then latch the blue cable back over it. Okay, so it's gonna be kind of hard to see for you, but so you're gonna wanna put the cable in, and then as you're pushing it in, pull on the beige back towards the white. So now the cable is locked in, and now the blue can be pushed back down over it, so now the cable is secured. So now, easiest thing to do is, again, towards the bottom of the case, you want to attach that first. So just line that in place. So you see here, this is fully seated here, and then the top, you're just gonna fold that down so everything clicks into place. So now the entire front is put back on. So what we'll do now is come back over to the side. We have this angled piece. Again, it's on rails in the inside, and also this little button that's raised up right here. It's not a button, but it's just a little plastic raised section. that goes directly underneath the button here. So start from outside, put it in the rail until it meets the other side, and now it's in the rail, and now you can slightly pull that towards the front, and you see right here, keep on going, and it kind of clicks slightly into place, and now you can see that it fully attaches right here, and it's directly underneath the button. And to make sure you click the button, and it will click, and that way you know for a fact that it's seated correctly. So the last piece to connect is going to be the first thing we took off, the side panel. So all you're gonna do here is just line it up and then push. And that's it. And that is a fully reassembled Xbox One. I hope this video was helpful, so that way you could see fully how to take apart and reassemble a Xbox One original, so that way you could repair, upgrade, or just replace the thermal paste for your console to make sure that it will keep on running as long as possible. If you like this video, I have other videos about taking apart other consoles and reassembling them, so go ahead and check those out, and I will have more coming in the future, so go ahead and make sure you're subscribed to check those things out.